Hi, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be. Thank you so much for joining us today as we go through our right sizing and automation at scale in the public cloud today. Thank you for joining us. My name is Andy Welton. I'm the VP of Technical Sales, and I am joined by Faisal Mohammed, one of our senior cloud architects on my side. Hello, Faisal.
Hi.
I think we've got our webcams going. That's great. As you can see,
Yes.
we are in the midst of still our stay-at-home isolation. It's been about 14 weeks since I had a haircut. Faisal, I see somehow you managed to get one yourself, so good on you.
Thank
You're
you.
looking nice and tidy and clean. So just before we get started, if you've got any questions as we go through the webinar today, we're scheduled for 30 minutes. We'll go through some slides to set the stage. If you've got questions, please enter them through the GoToWebinar interface there, and we will address them at the end of the presentation, and a recording will be made available to you next week and for, of course, anyone who was not able to attend. So let's get started. First off, in terms of Densify, we're not going to get into too much detail in the marketing slides, but from a high level, wanted to just reiterate what matters in cloud optimization and the areas that we help companies address in terms of cost management, optimization, and automation in the cloud. First off, our analytics are designed to go through your AWS, your Azure, your GCP, and your containers-based environments, wherever they may live, and figure out what is the right type and the right quantity of infrastructure to buy in the infrastructure as a service areas. We'll show you a few examples of those things today. The idea, of course, being to reduce the waste. Cost optimization is key and top of mind for many companies today, but also ensuring that the applications running on those instances have the right amount of resources to make sure there's no performance issues or service levels or thresholds being breached. The precision at which we do this is such that it's not a black box type of recommendation. We provide very detailed analytics that can be actioned and make the application owners comfortable in terms of the recommendations that we're providing, that they typically do not care about cost, but they do care that their applications are going to be safe and healthy. So we provide the deep level of detail around these things called application owner or impact analysis reports. And finally, part of the whole thing, and Faisal's going to get into some details around how we can take those recommendations and actually automate them through your infrastructure as code, your CI/CD frameworks. In terms of the benefits of automated right sizing, just going to move these webcams out of my way here so I can present. There we go. The economic reality, of course, is that everyone needs to respond to the current pandemic economies, the increased pressure to manage the infrastructure costs. What we're finding is that cost optimization is not just the job of the folks in the finance areas. That they need to understand application costs, make sure that the developers are well informed so that they can make better decisions themselves. In terms of increased organizational efficiency, understanding the utilization of the reserved instances, the savings plans that they're using today, and how well those things are actually covering their current state. Lowering waste is, of course, a big challenge for folks today in terms of turning off unused instances and resources that are basically just sitting there. The ability to respond better to demand and traffic surges around auto-scaling groups, and essentially just making sure that they are well suited and got the right amount of infrastructure to deal with unanticipated traffic surges. And around that particular topic, just making sure that the infrastructure that they're using is well suited to meet the application demand and the performance requirements. And of course, in order to do all these things, you need to be able to make decisions faster, need to be able to move from manual decision-making processes and manual efforts to actually do the provisioning into automation and innovation. Anything to add there, Faisal?
Andy, you pretty much hit it bang on the nail there. What we're noticing overall, like in the cloud industry, a recent study says about 35% of cloud economy is actually wasted. And essentially what you said there, what CIOs and CFOs are saying is that, hey, listen, rather than just finance, the entire organization needs to understand that cost optimization is everyone's role. And we're all in this together in this COVID-19 economy to make sure that we cut back on our operational costs. And that's essentially why automated right sizing is very, very important to organizations in this particular economy, to bring down those costs, and they can innovate faster with that money that they're saving.
Great, thank you, Faisal. In terms of making these recommendations at scale, I mentioned earlier around the fact we need the evidence, the details in order to be able to automate. And the first step to do that is to ensure that the application owners, architects are comfortable with the recommendations that we're making. They typically do not want you to mess with the applications and resources. So we provide these human readable application owner detailed reports in order to provide the evidence as to, if we're going to make a change to your infrastructure, is it going to be a safe change? Is it going to be within the limits that you're comfortable with? Because ultimately, those are the folks that are going to have to approve those changes. And from a cloud operations and engineering team, we could provide 500, 1,000 different recommendations. Those folks don't have time to manually implement all those things. They have a day job as well. So we provide machine readable actions and API output. So essentially taking our recommendations and surfacing them into infrastructure as code and automation APIs through Terraform. Faisal is going to speak a little bit more about Terraform today. I'm actually going to show an example using a live CloudFormation demonstration, Ansible, whatever the configuration management tool might be as well. It's for those folks, quality answers integration means that they can actually automate and make these things happen at scale. Two quick customer examples I wanted to provide here. Here's one, and of course names have been redacted. A large digital service provider automated AWS cost optimization, 13,000 AWS instances, fully integrated into their DevOps processing for continual and constant right-sizing of their infrastructure. Their investment was paid for in the first 3 months through a detailed analysis of the reserved instances and their savings plans, and the ability to automate, work with the AWS marketplace, the APIs in there to do a continual exchange of their committed reserved instances. And they're just in the process of doing detailed integrations into some of their infrastructure as code templates. So we call that optimization of pure public cloud at scale. Another example, large retailer, 47,000 instances. They've got seasonal analysis and automated rebalancing that needs to occur. So they've got not only a VMware environment, but also a very large Kubernetes and a Google Cloud environment. So they take the recommendations from Densify. A lot of the information is surfaced to them through their enterprise reporting systems through Tableau. And through their implementation and automation, they've seen a 30–40% reduction in their container resources. So we call this optimization of container infrastructure at scale. So two good examples of customers that are leveraging automation to make optimization happen. Faisal, I'm going to turn this component over to you to talk a little bit more about how this actually happens in some detail.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Andy. The key message, Andy, that you resonated there was at scale. If you are a small business owner, you have 10 systems to optimize. That yes, you could use the human readable reports, the PDF documents. But imagine if you have 100, 500, 1,000. Some of our customers, as you showed, 13,000 systems. In that case, it's just not feasible to do this manually on a day-by-day basis. And that's where automation comes into play. You want to push the go button on this and say, hey, go ahead and right size my infrastructure daily or whenever I'm rebuilding my infrastructure up, and make sure that it's correctly sized so that I'm operating at the best possible cost. And what we look at in this case here, this is actually a good example with Terraform. As you are aware, in Terraform, you have your main.tf file where you define your actual infrastructure details, which AMI you should be using, what region to launch it, what part of VPC what VPC it belongs to, and what subnet it belongs to, etc. Well, one of those actual lines is there the actual instance type that you see there in the line number 8 there. And what we're recommending here is saying that, hey, rather than you specifying or hard coding the actual instance type, what if you could actually make a reference to Densify? So in this case here, what you're doing is you're actually doing a lookup. You're basically going to be populating your variables file in Terraform. In this case, you're going to be populating by saying, hey, Densify recommends, and rather than me running that on an M4 extra large, perhaps it could run on a T3 large. And that's going to be populated real time as you're rebuilding your infrastructure whenever you run that infrastructure as code as part of your CI/CD framework altogether. So rather than hard coding it, you're basically making sure that it's always correctly sized based on the actual workload demands that it needs there. And that could be either Terraform, CloudFormation, or Ansible, as you saw there. Now, what we have here is Densify APIs. You can go to our Densify help page. We've invested a lot of time over the last 12 months to actually add a lot of functionality to our APIs. And these are RESTful APIs that you can invoke through your code there. And you can get various functionalities. You get JSON type responses or Terraform type responses coming back to you. And what you're seeing here is that you have various functionalities. You could subscribe to recommendations. For example, if I was an application owner, I'm running a development system. I want to make sure that I only want to get those development systems that belong to me. I can subscribe to them at specific intervals. I could also say I want to filter recommendations. I only want to look at those development systems that are SAP HANA. Those are the ones that I really want to optimize today. On the other hand, I could have recommendations that I don't want to see because I know I've sized them for a particular reason. Perhaps for HA, I need to make sure that I have 2 of these EC2 systems always running. In that case, I can suppress some of these recommendations. What you also have is the ability to download these actionable insights. So what you see there on the bottom left corner here is the actual response body coming back from one of our Terraform requests, from one of our API calls. And there's various details in there, nuances such as the recommended instance type. Do you want to optimize it or do you want to manually size that? You can actually see the URL to get the actual application report. And from feedback from one of our large customers, they actually want to see granular hourly prices. So what's the hourly cost of running that instance today versus the recommended instance? So you could actually see that there too as well. So various details are coming in, very little levels of details that lets you understand why or how to make that change happen. And as Andy pointed out, you can take that output, and then now if you have a third-party system, whether it's Tableau, QuickSight, Looker, or whether you have an approval ticketing system such as Jira or ServiceNow, you can integrate with that. We also have a Postman collection available. So if you would like to go ahead and experiment with this to see what kind of data comes back, please go to the Densify help page. There's an API page there, and you can go see the exact details of the API, what the calls you need to make, what are the outputs, and then play around with the Postman collection to see, okay, well, that's what comes back there. Thank you, Andy. And if you're thinking about strategies to, and Andy, you can build out this slide fully, absolutely. Sure. Go ahead. Yeah. So if you're thinking about actually strategies to automate altogether, well, what are some ideas that we see out there in the industry altogether? What we're seeing is customers saying, okay, well, now that I have these recommendations and say I had 5,000 systems, well, then now I have my preferred infrastructure as code or configuration management tool, whether it's Terraform or CloudFormation, or whether I use Ansible or Lambda functions. I have these recommendations that are coming from Densify. I could either store them in a parameter store or any other system of record, like S3, for example, or even my own variable files. I could take those recommendations. I could integrate them with Jira and ServiceNow, so that now maybe an app owner needs to see that recommendation and trust it and approve it. We can automate it through that. Or if you have other operations management tools, such as AWS Systems Manager and OpsWork, you can actually integrate with that and say, hey, by the way, I like the recommendation. I approve the recommendation, but I want that recommendation to happen only on a Sunday night at 12 midnight. That's my maintenance window. So you could actually define that. We have a great webinar coming up on July the 7th. Andy will talk about that, where we're actually going to show you how we have built that actual end-to-end integration with ServiceNow and Densify, and then AWS OpsWorks, a full automation workflow with you managing that whole operations chain as well. Yes, Andy? And so what does this look like in the wild if you were to actually go ahead and run this? Well, you have your resource providers, whether it's AWS, Azure, GCP, VMware, or IBM Cloud. What we do is we collect that data. We bring that data in and we analyze and densify. And by that, we mean we're looking at CPU, memory, disk I/O, network I/O. We understand what the resource requirements are, and we analyze that, and then we give out recommendations. As Andy pointed out, they could be a PDF document, so someone gets a report, an impact analysis report, or it could be something coming out in JSON or Terraform format, machine readable output. Now, if I'm an app owner, I have my own build process. Let's say I'm using Jenkins as my build server. So in this case here, whenever I'm building up my tools, I would say I'm building them up at midnight. I'm going to go ahead and say, yep, go ahead, Jenkins, and deploy this. As the source code gets deployed, it's part of my DevOps pipeline. I'm going to make an invocation to Densify, and Densify is going to say, hey, remember the M4 extra large that you were going to spin up? It should be a T3 large. So let me substitute that variable as part of that merge build process. And then now, whether I'm using CloudFormation or Terraform, I'm actually going to deploy the correct infrastructure and ensure my application is always updated and self-optimizing. This ensures that not only my application is running, it's running optimally at the right resource specifications, but also at the lowest possible cost for my business. Again, cost optimization is everyone's job. This is how you integrate that into the whole CI/CD pipeline there. Andy, go ahead.
Perfect.
Oh, last thing, of course, you can also get integration to Slack, and Andy, I think you'll show that today as well.
Yeah, I'm going to show a Slack integration using and leveraging the APIs to subscribe to certain applications, and it show how we go through that process of approval through that collaboration system. And at this point, maybe I'll turn this over to you, Faisal, and you can go through a little more detail on the Terraform side, and then we'll switch back to me for the wrap up in the final part of this demo.
Sounds good, Andy.
So let us switch that over. We change the presenter. If you're ready to go, I'll send this over to you.
Sure, please go ahead. And just let me know, Andy, if you can see my screen.
Yeah.
I'm just going to move my window over.
Yeah, we can see all this.
I should be showing my Densify screen, correct?
Yep. Correct.
Excellent. So as I mentioned, that we do have a Terraform integration with Densify. And if you were to go Google up Terraform registry Densify, you can actually see this particular link here. You can see the actual links on how to make some of these recommendations happen. Here's an example. So what I mean by this is that what you want to do is you have your original existing Terraform code and don't modify anything there, but rather just include an invocation to a module. This particular module is saying, hey, let me go ahead, call to Densify, and I've defined certain variables in my variables.tf file, which are coming in from Densify. In this case, it's giving me the recommendations. And if you were to see actual examples of them, you can actually see there's a GitHub page. If you were to go click on that link, you would actually go in there and see examples of EC2, autoscale groups, or RDS. And running through the quickly code, you'll see over here, here's an example of what that would look like. So again, this is my Terraform's code overall. And you can see that here's where the invocation is going out to my modules. We can be populating them exactly at your build time. So essentially, you don't have to change anything in your code except for just call out to Densify, and that's about it. I mentioned the Densify APIs. Again, they're available in Densify help page. You can go ahead and see that we're constantly adding new features and functionalities. And you can actually see all the actual kinds of API calls that you can make here, and what kind of actual details come back from each of these recommendations. So if you were to make a call, what kind of output comes back to you? Andy, at this point, I'll pass it back to you so you could show them a quick view of how the Slack integration would work.
Perfect. Thanks, Faisal.
You're welcome.
So first, what I'm going to do is just what I wanted to highlight was one specific system. So what I've drilled into is the Densify interface running, and we're looking at a specific set of applications here. This one is the mobile development app, and there is a variety of different recommendations for each one. Just to show you, I've got the corresponding instances actually running in AWS here. So they're actually the same systems running live, and we've done the analysis here. What I wanted to show here was I've got one system I'm going to focus in on, 1252. It's currently running as a C4 double extra large, and there is a recommendation to take that to an R5A. As you can see from a predictive workload pattern, this system is not leveraging all the resources on a compute optimized, and we can actually optimize the behavior and the usage of the, make this thing more efficient by running on now a memory optimized R5A and you can see the before and after workload curves based on our predictive analytics of what this thing has done in the past versus what it's going to do in the future. Now, a lot of folks don't want to use, say, the interface. They're comfortable with other interfaces. Maybe they'd like to use just a reporting engine to see these results. I want to flip over to the Densify side and say, well, I can subscribe to certain applications and get my recommendations simply through Slack. This would be my preferred channel potentially. I don't want to learn another interface. I just want to see the applications that I care about here. So I've got two that I actually care about, Mobile Prod and Mobile Dev. And I can show the details here to say, what recommendations do you have for me today, Densify, on this particular infrastructure? And so there's a couple of different ones in here. 1252 is the one I actually wanted to do. I can actually, just before we started this demonstration, I actually actioned this one, but I'm going to show this to you. 1252 is the one I want to look at. You can actually look at a couple other ones as well. You can see the ability for me to actually change these things right in line here. I can add the report, that detailed application owner report, or I can actually approve the change here. For this one, it's a C4 extra large going to move to a C5N. So I can actually make that change if I want to. So that was Jenny 1. Let's flip back into the demonstration. And I actually have parameter store running here. Now, you mentioned earlier a little bit, Faisal, just wanted to reiterate, it's an area where we can actually store historical information, tags for specific instances. Let's see, Jenny 1 is actually in here as well. And what's interesting is I can look at the fact that it is now a C5 large. If I look at the history, that was a C4 extra large, and I've now approved a change to a C5N large. And the tags are actually in here as well. We talked a little bit about the fact that all the tags through the API, we can actually publish those and use parameter store, in this case, as our centralized repository of information. Did I miss anything, Faisal? You're the more technical. You're my architect guy, so.
Absolutely. I mean, this is beautiful because, again, for a system administrator or an IT manager, you want to know the history of your systems. Okay, when and what date, what happened. Well, this is where you have the full audit trail. You can see, okay, on the first, it was the C4 extra large, and then now it's a C5N large. So you get to see the history of the changes that are coming through. This allows you to track the progress. Are you improving your infrastructure, or are you not improving your infrastructure? What changes were made on what date, and how much dollars are you saving by making each of these changes? So if your CIO or CFO or a finance team comes to you and says, okay, well, Andy, I need you to make sure your infrastructure is operating at the lowest possible cost. Well, here's your audit trail that you can prove that, yes, I am actually doing all the right things that are necessary to cut back on those costs there. So that's great. This is absolutely very, very beneficial for organizations to keep a track of that history there.
Savings estimates and all those tags can actually be added in the system, can all be reported on. And what's interesting as well, and I'm going to show a different way through a simplified interface here. I can actually take this, and I'm not going to actually change the resources. If I actually went through, took my CloudFormation templates and refreshed those templates, updated the stack, so to speak, I could see those actual instances change. I'm just going to make a simple change here, just saying, hey, I'm going to move that approval back. I'm going to turn that flag off. I'm just going to use the Densify interface to do that. And what's interesting in here is I can go back to the history, and we'll see that it's gone back to the C4 large. And the overview here basically is that the approval has been reversed. So the live integration is there. And again, when are you going to make these changes? It's really part of a specific maintenance window typically. If you're going to change things, you actually want to fit into the whole approval cycle. I did my approvals through Slack. Some customers might use Jira or ServiceNow to actually make these changes from an application owner hitting the button and saying, yeah, I approve that.
And lastly, Andy, one more thing that they can do, I mean, there's that tag that's called self-optimizing. And if they decide to make things, yeah, I think it goes down to, yep, there you go, implementation method self-optimization. That's another way of doing that too. So if you were to use a tag and say, okay, well, these infrastructure, I'm okay to automate and make them happen at any time, you can just click on you can put a tag in there, and tag-based automation is also possible through a Lambda function or anything else that you want to do. I mean, the sky is the limit. And at the end of the day, that's the whole point. You want to automate, and you want to automate at large scale for, so that you're not manually doing these changes, but doing them for thousands, 5,000 systems every day, essentially.
Yeah, and the policy helps control that. In this particular case, the one I ended up focusing on, some changes would be, it's like, yeah, I'm good for self-optimization for certain types of recommendations, but I never want to automate certain kinds of recommendations like a terminate. Someone's going to have to prove that and go out and do that because that's not a change that possibly I'm comfortable making through automation. Great, so let's go back. I'm just keeping an eye on the time. We are right near the end. So let's go back to the PowerPoint slideshow and just say, if you'd like to get this started yourself, there's a page on our website. Just go to densify.com, hit the button that says start a trial. You fill out a form with some business information. We'll get in contact with you within 1 business day. And essentially, it's a matter of putting in your credentials for whatever your public cloud is, or for VMware. Essentially, you put that information in, and within typically 15 minutes or so of spinning up your instance, entering these credentials, the wheels will start turning, and we'll pull back historical data from your public cloud and get an idea what your own optimization opportunity looks like. I'm just going to keep an eye here, have a look if we've got any questions in the interface right now. It looks like we do actually have one, which is good. So before I get to the actual final wrap up here, I do have a question here. It says, Faisal, it's a recommendation only around RIs and savings plans. Is spot instances also a category of recommendation?
So right now we are looking at on demand. So we're looking at mostly, I would say, non-spot instances, because spot instances, what you can do is you can do some kind of API calls to AWS to get some spot advisor recommendations. And there's not a whole lot of value in that there. So we look at essentially more like the longer running non-transient workflows, because those are the ones that are actually contributing the most to your actual bill. That's why we look at those there.
Yep, we do have information. We do our analytics are informed on the spot instances that are running, but you're quite right. A lot of times the optimization opportunity is not there for something that's very short-lived. Other questions right now? Not seeing any others. I'll just keep an eye on that window. Upcoming webinars. You mentioned earlier, we've got a couple coming up next month. We've got a full-blown integration workshop, ITSM controlled optimization of EC2 and RDS services. So that's going to be a very interesting workshop. You can register for that on our website, as well as the one the next day, where Faisal and I might be returning to deliver the AWS savings plans and reserved instances. There's still a lot of question out there, especially for companies that have invested heavy in reserved instances. What should they be doing? So we're going to talk a little bit about best practices around that.
Yes, absolutely. That's a very, very heavy topic these days as companies looking to automate, right size, and trying to cut back on cost. The ever-ending debate, whether should we use savings plans or reserve instances? What's the differences between the two of them? That's going to be a great talk to talk about there.
Just one other question here around the types of tooling that can be used. I'm just going to paraphrase right now, but from a high level, it looks like you're using specific configuration management tool. Faisal, we're using an API. I would expect that if it's a tool that we hadn't seen before, is it something that we can integrate to? We mentioned a number of technologies today: Terraform, CloudFormation, Ansible. What about things like Chef or Puppet? What's your thoughts on that?
Absolutely, absolutely. Again, our API is built very, very flexible. We have a great professional services team as well. So if there's necessary customization that needs to happen on top of that, we can definitely implement them. But the API is very, very flexible. The recommendations come out of the engine, and then whatever configuration management tool, again, Puppet, Ansible, Chef, the sky's the limit. If there's certain tweaks or modifications we need to do based on your particular specific need, again, our professional services team can adapt to that and make it happen. Yes.
And one last question, and it looks like that's the last one I'll have time for because I'm 1 minute over. Are your recommendations informed about RIs? I've got a bunch of RIs today. Are you going to recommend that I change them out?
Absolutely. So we are fully RI aware of recommendations. That's one of our key strengths. What we do is not only make an optimization recommendation, but we're also taking into consideration your RI inventory. So how much RI you have purchased today? What's their actual utilization? Are you fully utilizing those RIs, or are they laying idle and being wasted? What's your intended RI coverage? And using all those different factors into consideration, we're going to make recommendations for you to say, hey, by the way, I noticed you've purchased in RI, but this recommendation is asking you to move away from it. So how about you hold on to that RI, and until it expires, don't make that change happen. But once
Right.
that RI is expiring, go ahead and action that out there. So we're fully RI aware. Now,
Right.
on
In,
the
in,
other
in
side,
which case it could be convertible as well, right?
yeah, absolutely. And that's the other part. So if it's a convertible, all right, then hey, it's an open field. In that case, one of the customers, we showed them how to save almost $40,000 in about 3 to 4 months time, just by making sure that those RIs that were idle, converting them to the ones that they actually need, so that they maximize that RI utilization, RI coverage, and then they paid for them, so might as well get the benefits out of them, right? So.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks very much for the details, Faisal. It was once again great presenting with you. And for anyone who missed, if you had additional questions, please follow up through our contact buttons inside the website. For the upcoming events, just go to densify.com/company/events and sign up for the next July events. And we look forward to seeing you at those ones. So have a great day, have a great week, and we will see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.